We'll go ahead and get started. Well, good evening and thanks for joining us for Women in Charge. This is our latest program in our Let's Talk Bridging the Divide series. I'm Rachel Platt. I'm the Community Engagement Director here at the Frazier History Museum. 2020 is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And so much of our programming this year has been about women, the struggle back then and the struggle now to break barriers and ceilings. We have an exhibit here at the Frazier, What is a Vote Worth? Suffrage Then and Now, documenting that struggle through the years. And my guess is many of you have seen this meme on social media. Make sure to wear shoes, ladies. There's glass everywhere. Some glass ceilings have been shattered this year, nationally, of course, with the first woman and woman of color as Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, and locally, ceilings shattered by the two women who join me on our panel tonight with the top positions in law enforcement right here in Louisville. Yvette Gentry became the first woman to hold the title of Louisville's police chief when she was named to that position in September and then sworn in as the interim chief in October. She becomes the first female to ever lead the department in its 200-plus year history. Amy Hess becomes the first woman to hold the position of chief of public safety, overseeing the police department. She also broke barriers in the FBI, becoming one of the highest ranking women in the FBI before moving back home and working here now in city government. She is a Jeffersonville native. Gentry is a Louisville native, both women choosing public service. We're going to get to their journeys in just a moment. And we also want to welcome Ron Jones right there, who you see, Community Relations Director of 104.7 WLOU and 1240 AM WLLV. You can write your questions. He's going to be facilitating those. You can write them in the Q&A section. We already have a couple already in there if you're joining us by Zoom, and the comment section if you're joining us on Facebook Live. So I'm going to start, though, with the first question for the audience. I always like to kind of get a pulse of the discussion and how our audience is feeling. So question number one. This is the question again for the audience. Are women judged more harshly in leadership roles than their male counterparts? You can answer yes, no, or not sure. Now our panel or hosts I can't vote and neither can our panelists, but we're going to ask them the question when we're done seeing what the audience has to say. Again, are women judged more harshly in leadership roles than men? We'll go ahead and see if we have our results ready yet and see what that is. Tallying those up. In our audience, 87% say yes, women are judged more harshly, 13% say no, and 0% said not sure. All right, Chief Gentry, we're going to start with you. Your thoughts on that question. Do you think women are judged more harshly in leadership roles than men?
I think we are. I mean, I think, sometimes when we display our strength and our resolve, we are characterized sometimes as being, either, harsh or, or emotional instead of passionate and strong. So I think there is definitely a difference in the way people describe us when we're showing our strength and our resolve.
Chief Hess, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say yes. And actually, I would add that a lot of times it's by other women. And what I mean by that is sometimes we tend to judge each other even more harshly, which is really kind of unfortunate, as opposed to supporting each other in these roles and take a more critical eye. However, that said, is that I don't think either of us would have been in the positions we're in and have been in if it hadn't been for the support of, particularly our male counterparts and colleagues and supervisors along the way.
Let me ask that because I want to pick up on sometimes women can judge each other more harshly. When you all started this together, knowing that you both were breaking barriers, did you all have any discussion going into this working together as two females in those top positions?
We didn't really have much of a chance to figure that out. I knew people that knew Chief Hess, and I knew of her, from her role here before I had left. And I had a respect for what she was doing over at the FBI, but I really didn't have a chance to really connect with her until I really came in the door just a week or two before I came through the door. So I get that question often about, how I feel about working with her, because it is different. Normally, you're in both of us in male dominated, and for me to report directly to her, it's been good. I mean, we're learning each other. But she's been a good person to talk to. She's really mellow. She kind of balances me out. I mean, she has this kind of straight line of the way that she kind of processes things, and it's a great balance for me. And so she'll hear me and my passion and all of that stuff, and then she kind of like processes it really, really quick, and she gives it back to me in a way I'm like, yeah, that's what I meant. So it's been good. It's really been good to have the opportunity to work closely with her.
Chief Hess being described as mellow. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I like it. Yeah. I actually, and first off, I agree with Yvette, is that, I'd heard of Chief Gentry, but I had not had an opportunity really to work with her before. So it was new to us as this year has unfolded. I think we've all experienced a lot of unexpected changes. And so it was one of those where I don't think we really had a lot of time to kind of sit back and digest and to really get to know each other because of just all the circumstances we've been in this year. And so it was really helpful to know that somebody like Yvette was coming in who could hit the ground running, who had experienced all of these things and had such great ties to the community and to the police department. So that certainly made me feel better, and in knowing that she was going to assume the role of the interim chief. And as she said, is that we talk many times a day about many topics, and it's just good to hear different perspectives. We have different perspectives on things, and I think I certainly value and benefit from listening to the way she views problems, because they may not be the same way that I'm thinking about them.
So those different points of view. I want to talk about your journeys and what led you to do the work that you're doing now. So Yvette, let me start with you. What led you to police work?
It's interesting. I always wanted to be a teacher. I say, I'm 50 years old now, and I'll be a teacher when I grow up. So I guess that's next. But I think my mother worked here since I was 2 years old. My mother was in communications. She worked in a radio room since I was 2 years old. I started there, when I was very young, in about 19 or 20 years old. But so I was always around the communication side of law enforcement, not really around a lot of cops, but my neighbor across the street, Mary Lett, was a cop. And I was talking to somebody just recently. She was a single mother. She had 2 daughters that I went to school with. And I always watched her. And she's a reverend now at Burnett Avenue. And I never really realized how much I respected her until I watched her. And then when I came on the police department, she still was just such a great officer. So, she had more of an impact on me than I realized in the beginning. But so I've always been around law enforcement, and then I went into the military right after high school. So the communications part, it was kind of a dead end. You can only go so far. And so I've always been a person that wanted to see what was next and try to achieve the next thing and set pretty lofty goals for myself. So this is kind of the journey that I've been on.
Let me ask you one more question with a follow-up with that. One thing that you said that struck me when you were sworn in, and it's something I didn't know, because it was very short and very succinct what you said that day. You said, I'm a runaway. I got kicked out of school, got kicked out of band, but today I'm chief. Tell me about that. I did not know that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think sometimes I always relate to kids because I feel like so many times we're very hard on young people. And I just felt like, I had put pen to paper several times to have a speech to say something, and then I got up there and I was so emotional. Really, the day I got sworn in, and I didn't talk about it a lot, was my cancer-free anniversary. So that's kind of my new birthday, right? So October 1st means a lot to me because it's the day they told me, the cancer's gone, you should be okay, And so I had a lot of that going on in my mind. But then I just thought to myself, when I saw my nieces, I was like, I was the kid that didn't always follow the rules. I was not what you would call a good kid by any stretch of the imagination. and still, you know, I was able to have some adult mentors, some coaches that believed in me, even when I didn't feel like I deserved it. Went through a lot, you know, and I ran away from home wanting to be grown. I haven't lived back in my parents' house since I was 15 and a half, you know. But you can still be okay. And I think that message is important for young people to say, you know, just because you make a poor decision when you're 15, 16, 17, like you can stand in your purpose at 50 years old. Just don't give up on yourself.
I thought it was really powerful. And I think that message definitely hits home for it. What happened then doesn't have to weigh you down your entire life.
Right. I didn't get my degree until I was 40 years old, but I started to believe in me after other people believed in me. And I was a late comer to believing in myself. And I think people just needed to hear that. And that's all the words I could get out that day. It just came to me, just inspire somebody, some young girl out there that just thinks that she's made too many poor decisions and her dream will never happen.
And Chief Hess, let's talk about your journey. How did you get to the FBI? Because so many of the positions you held, you may have been the only woman or one of few women. So what was it? Did you always know FBI? And tell me a little bit about that. What led you?
Sure, yeah. Like you said, I grew up in Jeffersonville, right across the river. My dad was an attorney. My brother became an attorney. But until my sister went to the Indiana State Police Academy, we didn't have any law enforcement in our family. I'd never shot a gun before. I mean, I think one time maybe before I went to the FBI Academy. But when I was 11 years old, we toured Washington, D.C. We went on a family vacation. And I just remember we toured the FBI headquarters building there, where I ultimately ended up working 4 different times over the span of 10 years. And it just stuck with me from the age of 11. I either wanted to be an FBI agent or an astronaut. You know, I was 11 years old. That's what my goals were. And it ended up panning out. But I will say that, you know, in listening and talking to other people too, is that one thing I didn't feel that I had to overcome was the fear of working around a lot of men, because I grew up in a neighborhood full of boys. I played sports. When I went to Purdue, I majored in engineering, which was mostly at that time, mostly men. And then going to the FBI, it was mostly men. Even today, it's about 20% of the special agent population are women. So that part never really seemed, I don't know, to scare me that much, as much as other parts of the job did.
So let me ask you with that, because when you know, there's not a lot of representation in those fields for either of you. Was it the confidence that you had in yourself that led you to that? Or did you have mentors or role models who were women? I mean, it doesn't sound like perhaps you all did in those fields. Now, Yvette, you, but maybe not you, Amy.
When I was growing up, there weren't a lot of women role models on television, at least not in law enforcement. I mean, what do we have? Like Charlie's Angels and, Policewoman, which
okay, not very realistic role models.
Exactly. I didn't have realistic women role models is my point. Yes. And so, I didn't. I was thinking, I was in the FBI for 10 years before I had my first female supervisor. And so I really, I didn't see a lot of women in the roles above me, but that just never occurred to me that because I didn't see somebody who looked like me, that I shouldn't try to do that thing. And I know now in talking to a lot of people that sometimes it's very meaningful. People do need to see people who look like them in those roles. And I took that to heart later in my FBI career, probably too late, in that I could make myself more visible and really convey that you could be here too, and hopefully encourage younger women coming up in the organization.
I was going to say, because we hear so much, you can't be what you can't see. So a lot of times that representation is very important. But for you, you kind of blazed the trail then, because you didn't have many who you were seeing in those positions. Did you feel like a trailblazer?
No. I just, it's funny. I tell the story about being a selecting official, a hiring official in the FBI. You're on a promotion board, and we're picking the leaders in the organization, whether they're leading a field office or leading divisions at headquarters. And a lot of times what I see is women don't apply. And when I dug into that, as though, because we always talk about why aren't there more women in management? And when you dig into that, you realize it's because they're not applying. And then you go to them and you ask, well, why aren't you applying? And sometimes you'll get, the responses, and especially in the FBI, if you go into management, you got to move around a lot. You're expected to. They don't want to move. They don't want to uproot their families. But another part of it, and a big part, I think, is because they don't feel qualified. Women tend to want to feel overqualified before they'll apply for a position. Whereas studies have shown that, men don't really,
they don't
really
worry about that like
assurance.
we do, right? I saw Chief Gentry, you were shaking your head yes a lot during that conversation. Tell me your thoughts on that.
I think so too. And I think it's so often it's just one female at the top in law enforcement. So once they see you, they feel like their opportunity is not going to come. So sometimes you get that challenge, but I've been really deliberate about making sure no matter what job I have, I leave qualified women behind me. When I was a sergeant, I would do classes in my living room for the next group of sergeants. When I was a lieutenant, I would, teach other females. I always wanted to leave my playbook for other females. And so I wanted to make sure that there was a qualified woman behind me everywhere I went. And I remember we had Bridget Skaggs here, and she was an assistant chief a long time ago, and very quiet, peaceful woman. You didn't hear a lot about her. And I remember her one time asking me, "Are you going to take the promotional exam?" I mean, this was a woman that she didn't talk much. And I was like, "I don't know." And she said, "I think you should." And I was like, I'm on her radar. Who knew? And so it's just things like that you just need to say and encourage other women. And I think that's too why I'm really get sensitive when other women are really critical, because I really try to be intentionally helpful. I want to make sure women, like Chief Hess was saying, when I came in here, I want to say, what are the women getting paid? Let me look at the pay, because we don't typically ask for raises. And so a lot of non-union people, you'll find yourself, especially women of color, we don't ask for raises. We sometimes just come in a place and feel unapologetically, happy to be on the bus and not always seek the equity that we deserve. So when I go into an organization, I want to see that. When I came back to the mayor's office, I looked at the pay of other women, in Black and white, and I realized that often we were underpaid, and I wanted to immediately make sure that people got pay equity. So it's very important to me to bring other women along, for sure.
I think so too. I know when I was in TV, one thing when young women would come in, when I was first starting out being an anchor or a reporter, that was where you were making your mark. And all the young women, and I was like, run the place, aim higher, and I think that's important for women in positions to say, you can do it and do better than what I did. Go to the top. And I do think that other women encouraging other women is the way it should be, without a doubt. Chief Gentry, so we talked about being a female and a Black woman. We have talked about racism in past interviews that we've done that you experienced in the department a few years ago. What about sexism and how you handled it?
I think so. Men never think, okay, this unit has room for 7 people and we're all 7 men and we all the same, and that's a problem. Only women think like that. We start to think, we got to hang with the guys and we can't be over here and we can't do that. And I'll tell you, when I stopped that, I stopped worrying about that, being the female that needed help and not asking for it, when I almost got myself killed years ago by not asking for help. And I have 4 sons. That was just stupid. I needed help. Men ask for help all the time. And so that's when I decided I'm not going to let that bother me as far as the sexism is concerned. I'm strong, I'm capable, but right now I need help. And I'm going to call for help anytime on the radio when I feel like I need help. I'm not going to get out here and get myself hurt worrying about this image that I have to have as a woman that can do it all on her own. And so I kind of let that go early on. And I realized, even coming back through this door, I mean, this is a mostly male organization. And so how I communicate with them, I'm sure there's times that they walk away and are not happy with the way I say stuff. I'm a very direct person, but I really charge it to, it's a leadership thing. I'm going to lead the way I am. sometimes I shed a tear, and that's okay. You and I talked about that before, when people were saying, you know, you can't keep getting on stage as the first female and shedding a tear. And that doesn't mean I cry all the time. I'm a strong person, but you know what? It's okay to cry if you care about something. And I'm not going to mask that for people. People need to know that you can have the whole range of emotion and you can have the whole range of experience and still be the boss. And that's okay.
I'm going to get to that clip a little bit later because I want to talk more about with you. Chief Hess, what about sexism in any of the jobs you've had with the FBI? Did you experience it and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, you know, I've been asked that question before, and I got to say, and looking back over my FBI career, either I was naive or I had a just really good experience, because I've talked to other women in the FBI who've experienced more instances of this than I did. But very few examples come to mind. I mean, I remember, so for example, the one incident that I can remember as a street agent when I was out, well, you know, as an investigator, a special agent, working at that time, I was working gang and drug investigations on a gang task force, and I was the only woman on that task force. And I remember I walked into the squad room one morning and everybody was gone. And I thought, okay, well, that's weird. You know, where is everybody? Maybe they all went to breakfast or something. Well, I found out later they all went and did a search and arrest operation, and they didn't include me. You know, the coordinator, the supervisor, didn't think to tell me or didn't want to tell me. Now, granted, can I pin it directly to sexism? Probably not in so many words, but it's kind of weird that I'm the only one who's not invited, who's not included to participate in an all task force operation. And that just sort of stuck with me to the point where I mentioned it to several of the other, my colleagues, several of the other agents and task force officers. And I said, hey, look, you know, not for nothing, there's a reason I was excluded. And of course, I got a lot of, you know, hemming and hawing about it. But the one thing was that they saw that I was working hard. I was there for them. I volunteered. I've worked more hours than, you know, they were putting in. And they were the ones who made sure that the next time that the coordinator was sure to include me each and every time. My colleagues did that. It wasn't because my supervisor had a different attitude or, you know, changed his approach. It's because my colleagues took up for me and basically vouched for me.
So in that situation, you more talked to your colleagues. Did you go to your boss about it, your supervisor at the time?
Yeah, I did. I asked, I said, is there a reason I wasn't included in the operation? I didn't even know anything about it. And of course, he kind of shrugged it off. He said, well, we had enough people. Yeah. Now, like I said, is that, you know, maybe he didn't like the fact that, you know, I was a woman on an all male task force that he was running. Maybe he just didn't like me personally, which is fine because I didn't like him either. But you know, sometimes I think it's hard to tell, right? I mean, you don't know. Right. Is it sexism, or is it because you just, you know, your personalities aren't meshing?
But I love your lesson that your colleagues saw your hard work, and hopefully that's how it works. I'm sure it's not always the case that, you know, your colleagues then include you because they see your hard work, but hopefully that's the way it is. So let me ask, based on that, when you both go into a job, do you even think about it in terms of being a woman? And should we even think like that? I don't know which of you wants to answer that first.
Go ahead.
I think you have to. I think you have to think about it when you're working around, you know, people. I mean, I don't know that you have to, but I think I do think about it. I think about the way that I communicated with a lot of type A personalities here, right? That's what's here. And so I do think about it. And I think about the thoughtful nature in which I address my male counterparts when I have to call them. I did have breakfast with my command staff's wives in the short time I was here, you know, because they work with a female every day. And I just want to meet their wives and know who they are and then let them see my face. And I just think that's important as a female. I don't think a lot of men would think about that if you're leading a lot of women and I'm going to talk to their husbands, but
no, I would say not.
I would say not, but I feel like the wives have a lot of intel as far as how things have impacted their families.
So
and,
it
and
gives
stuff.
insight into who you work with through that spouse.
It
more
does,
than
and then
likely.
it gives them a chance to talk to their. I mean, I guess I've had male supervisors, and I missed out on some training opportunities because they would never let me go to training if my male boss was going. That was just Chief White was about like that. He would never go out of town with a female ever. You know, he would never go out of town. Let a subordinate female go to the same training he went to. He said you can go, or I can go, or they can go, or whatever. But he was really, and I guess he was just old school like that. And I got to understand that. It just, he just didn't do that. And I had other male that just wouldn't do that, not just for the even thought of any impropriety, I would imagine. But I just felt like, I wanted to meet the wives and let them get to know me and get my phone number and let them talk to me. And that's just one thing that I do as a female leader, leading a lot of men. So it's probably not necessary, but I think it's good.
All right. And I want to just reiterate that Ron Jones is looking through those questions that we're going to get here in just a few minutes, our question facilitator. Amy, you go ahead and answer that as well. As far as, do you even think about it being in terms of a woman, the job that you're getting ready to take? And should we think like that?
I know generally. Sometimes it occurs to me. So I'll use the example of at the time when I was the second person in charge of a field office, it's called the Assistant Special Agent in Charge, or ASAC. I was assigned to Tucson, Arizona. And during that time, we were in the middle of supporting overseas operations, the FBI was in general, for counterterrorism operations. And they were looking for ASACs, Assistant Special Agents in Charge, to go overseas, to go to Iraq and to go to Afghanistan. And I thought, this is a great opportunity, and I will learn a lot. I'll learn a ton. I didn't stop to think that, wait a second, have there been other women before me to do that? Or are there going to be other women? I just did it. And maybe, like I said, maybe that's naive of me, but I raised my hand and I just said, well, I'd like to do that. And so I did. And I was the first woman to do that and lead our counterterrorism operations over there. So in that sense, it didn't occur to me until I'm sitting in a command staff and general meeting one day, and I look around and I'm the only woman in this whole room. I mean, out of like 40 people, you got every rank in the military, and you've got all these other agencies. And at that point, just that one moment, and I've probably been doing this for like several days already. And I look around, I'm like, oh crap, I'm like the only woman here. And so it's one of those where it dawned on me then. And then I think you're even more cognizant of your actions and how you portray yourself. And you're hypersensitive, or at least I was at that point, to making sure that I'm not going to do anything that's going to reflect negatively on the FBI, on women in the FBI, on women in general. But I recognize that that's a weight that you carry.
Well, that was the exact word I was going to use to ask you. Do you feel that as a weight sometimes? So you felt it in that moment. Do you feel it now, Chief Hess? And then I'll ask Chief Gentry that same question.
Sure. I think that in any level of management and position where you're in a position of leadership, I'm very cognizant of, when I'm around other people, how I come across and how I'm being perceived, because I recognize I'm representing much more than just me. I'm representing an organization. I'm also representing, perhaps the first woman in a role in that organization, and I don't want to ruin it for the next person.
Chief Gentry, you weigh in because you're shaking your head yes too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want people to say this Black female chief thing experiment didn't work so well. So let's go back to what we're used to. So I very much feel the weight of that. I do. I will be completely honest about that. I come in here and I work very hard all day, every day, to make sure that I'm leaving this agency better, but also mindful that there's a lot of people looking at me, up to me, and I represent a lot of people, being where I come from, being a female, being a Black female, and I'm very cognizant of that every day.
Do we think
it is heavy?
Do we think men in these posts think that much about that?
No, I mean, you know, men don't even get asked the questions. I was frustrated when people were acting as if I wasn't qualified. I'm like, I was the person that started here answering the phones for $6 an hour. I've worked every job in the city that you can imagine. Nobody's worked as many jobs in the city. And to think I had to ask, you know, I had to be asked or answer the question, was I qualified? That was hurtful. You know, nobody has ever asked a male chief. They just assume not just chief that a man comes in that he has the qualifications. They're not looking at the resume twice with a red pen for most men. That's not what I see. That's just the reality. I feel like we're graded harshly on our qualifications for things, and I don't think that's fair. But that's a reality that we do face.
More of a magnifying lens.
Absolutely.
How about you, Chief Hess?
Yeah, I think going back to the issue of stereotyping is that because as Yvette just mentioned, is that you don't want people to look at you and say, oh, well, that didn't work. You know, I remember there was a deputy director in the FBI once, and at the highest levels of the FBI that I ended up ultimately achieving, you know, he made a comment once about the executive assistant director position. There are 6 of them in the FBI. And there was a woman who held one of those positions, and he goes, yeah, that was a failed experiment. And I thought, because why? She was a woman, or because, you know, so I was very cognizant of the idea that people are looking at you and judging you for that. He never said that. He wouldn't have said that about, you know, a male EAD. It just would have been a, you know, well, you know, we didn't like that guy, but, you know, let's get the next one. And so it was representative of a larger, you know, in his mind, a larger issue. And now the next time a woman might be considered for one of those positions, he'd stop and think, and he would hesitate. And that's what worries me the most, is that, you know, when we do that, we now aren't looking at qualifications, we're looking at characteristics. And that's a dangerous place to be in, because you're going to miss a great opportunity to put somebody in that spot that is much needed.
I'm going to ask another question of our audience right now. Question number 2, does the gender of your boss matter? I'm curious what people say to that. Does the gender of your boss matter? Yes or no? We'll have everybody weigh in on that and see what people think, if it does matter. I've had both. I'm just curious. We'll go ahead and see if we can get the tally there. Does the gender of your boss matter? Almost 44% say yes, 56% say no. Chief Hess, your thoughts on that?
Okay, my answer is it shouldn't. So I got to say, was I conscious of the fact, like I said, I spent 10 years in the FBI before I had my first female supervisor. I was very conscious of the fact I had a female supervisor, because that just wasn't a thing prior to that. For me anyway. And so I was critical in the sense that I was looking at her to say, okay, how is she different from what I'm used to? And every little thing she did was like exaggerated to me because of that. And that's unfair. That's not, you know, that wasn't fair to her. And whether I was doing it or somebody else was doing it. But that said, is that should it matter? No. We need to identify people based on qualifications and experiences, and whether or not they have earned the right to be in those positions, and look past the idea that, well, I've never had anybody in that position who looked like her or that person before.
Chief Gentry, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, being the first female in this job, I've had male chiefs, right, that I've worked for my whole career. So reporting to Chief Hess is what's new for me. And so it's important to me that she says we're very different people. So we talk, but it's important to me that people see us as united, you know, women that do get along, don't always agree on how to get somewhere, but have a mutual respect for one another. And so, you know, we bounce a lot of things off of each other. But when the decision is made, it's our decision. Well, it's her decision. She's the boss, but I would say, you know, the mutual respect that we have for each other, it's great. It's been a great experience. And even though I'm here for a short period of time, reporting to a female that I have a lot of respect for, It's a new experience for me, and it's good for me. And I hope this series is good for women. That's why, you know, with all the things we have going on and I want to do, I didn't want to do a lot of interviews. I really didn't. But I thought it was important when you said, well, I want you and Chief Hess together and we're going to put it out there. I want to see young women and women, professional women, see how two women can work together to achieve some things in some tough times and not turn on each other, look to each other for support. And that is what we're doing.
I love that. Let me ask you this, and then we're going to play that one clip because I want to go back into what you talked about earlier about showing your emotions, because you're a very passionate person, Yvette. I think anybody who knows you knows that. As women, do you think you bring anything different to the table in your leadership roles that perhaps your male counterparts do not? And what would that be? Either of you want to jump in on that one? Maybe not, maybe it's nothing, but I always just wonder, is there something that you think you bring that perhaps your male counterpart does not?
I don't know that my male counterparts don't bring it. I think show it, right? I know I've worked with some very gentle, great men. And I just think that I show the emotion because I think people need to see the whole range of what a police officer can be, right? We feel, I used to count and write the names of, I used to write the name of every homicide victim that I went to the scene of. I found out later that wasn't healthy, but I did it because I always would try to go to my scene and do my business before the mama showed up or before the family showed up, because that blood, see, I ain't gonna make it through this. That the loss from that mother's perspective was deep for me. And so I don't think it's anything wrong with showing that emotion, but I connect on the level of my work on a different level. And I feel like I need to show that to people, because what drives me to work 20 hours a day might be different than what drives other people. It was never the ambition of the other thing. It was doing my best. So I never had to hear a woman or a mother do that. That drove me for the majority of my career.
Based on what you said with emotion, I want to go to the clip now of when you were named to the job. And then I want to talk about that emotion. So let's watch this clip.
I'm not here just to help you unboard your beautiful buildings downtown. I'm here to work with you to unboard the community that I serve. So with all my heart in West Louisville that was boarded for 20 or 30 years, and I just could not find the help. So I'm here to help you do that because you promised to help me do that. Everyone had, for the past 4 months, it's been tough. It's been tough on the police officers out there trying to hold the line. It's been tough on the men and women out there protesting over 100 days. Seeing things just feel so hopeless. But I would just say that is just a glimpse of how a lot of people have been feeling for a long time, and we can't go back. I think our city is at a point of reckoning that only truth can bring us out of. Only truth can bring us out of. Only truth can take away darkness. We can't just hide behind signs that say Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, all of that stuff. We got to ask ourselves, if Breonna Taylor's name came across an application in this city, would she get an interview? Does your board of influencers and decision makers, anyone who has influence, does anybody look like her? Well-resourced Black son. We follow the rules that was put out there. Sent him to the good school. He had microaggressions. He worked 2 jobs to go move into the good neighborhood. And 3 days later, the neighbors were calling drug dealing complaints. Made him feel unwelcome. I served 20-something years willing to die for a city that wouldn't even make my son feel welcome.
right, Chief Gentry, I want to ask you about that. That was a very raw day for you. And I wondered, sometimes women are put in the position, if you don't show emotion, you're criticized. If you show too much emotion, you're criticized. Uh, are you there? Oh, she's connecting her audio now.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm struggling, but I'm here. I'm back.
Your thoughts on that about no emotion, you get criticized, too much emotion, you get criticized. Did you receive criticism for that? You said you
Did.
have
I mean,
received some.
it's not been short of it's there's no shortage of people with opinions on a lot of stuff. And I see somebody here talking about my faith. And I will just say that, you know, God healed me. I've had some tough days, you know, and so when I think about all that I've been given and all the grace that I've been given and all the mercy I've been given, I can't help but get emotional about that stuff. And so I think it's important for people to realize, you know, I come with all of my experiences, and sometimes if I feel like I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna cry. And I want people in this world to know, you know, it's okay to let that kind of emotion out. It's not a sign of weakness. It's mainly when you see me do that, it's more of a sign of gratitude and just the reality of all of it that I carry. But yeah, I received some people complaining about that, but you know, I'm good with that. I mean, this is who Yvette Gentry is. This is me and all my experience. Not perfect, but you don't have to be perfect to serve. And so I'm just going to be the best version of me I can be every day, and I'm good with that. So I hope other people learn to accept me for who I am.
I've seen a couple of comments on here where people are saying, you know, they appreciate the emotion. Many do. Shows greater level of empathy. It shows you care. Those kinds of things. But I always wonder, because women are kind of in that no-win situation at times when it comes to emotion, in my opinion, anyway. Chief Hess, you weigh in on this as well.
Yeah, that's a tricky one too, because I know that I remember once I totally lost it. I was under a lot of stress, and you know, there's a lot going on, and my supervisor basically came in to my office, and I just totally, you know, lost it in front of him, and I just remember this look of fear on his face, like, yeah, I don't know what to do with this, and so you know, it was one of those that wasn't helpful, comforting. I mean, I'm not blaming him. He didn't know how to react. And so it just reiterated to me that I need to try to not do that. And that's unfortunate because, you know, to Yvette's point is, you know, need to be your true self. But the person who's watching you and receiving that also needs to provide the atmosphere where it's okay to do that. It doesn't feel like they're judging or critiquing, or they're going to hold it against you because you show some type of emotion. And I think that was, in my 29 years with the FBI, one of my biggest fears was, unfortunately, it was that I was going to be looked at differently or judged differently or not considered for the next position because I did show emotion. And so I worked really hard to repress those emotions. And like I said, I'm not saying that's a good answer. That's not a good answer. That's the way I felt at the time. And so I would try to hide my emotions for most of my career.
But that, like you said, but an honest answer. So obviously it was something that you paid attention to. I've got a lot more questions, but Ron, I want to bring you in now because we've got a lot of questions from the audience I want to get to. And then I've got a couple more that I'll throw in at the end. But Ron, go ahead and ask that because they've had such great comments in the chat feature.
Yes. In fact, they've done so good with some of these questions that have already been asked. One of them is, though, education is a key concept that plays a vital role with leadership. How has this helped shape you, and what do you say to young millennials who do not think or act in the normal way that tradition has shaped young women?
Education is a game changer. Education shows you how to, critically think, how to, to assess situations. I get a lot of young entrepreneurs that come in, they have a lot of business ideas, but I'm like, have you done a needs assessment? You got to make sure that what you can provide is what that there's a need for that. So I really value education. It's something nobody can ever take from you. The city has done a lot through Evolve 502. That's something I've been a part of, to provide a free education. JCTC is providing that. So yes, I encourage every young person to get their education. I've gained so much value from my education, and I can't, even my military experience was great for me, but my formal education was invaluable to me.
Ms. Hess?
Yeah, I agree. I will say that my formal education opened doors that I wouldn't have otherwise had open for me. And a lot of times, when I get into our careers and then you find yourselves short on time and you're constantly putting out fires and doing other things, we spend very little time really developing ourselves. And seeking out the training, especially the higher, it seems like sometimes in management that you go, unless your agency requires it, then you do very little self-initiated type of training or learning, and that's really unfortunate, because I think the whole point is to want to continue to learn. I love learning. I love just being educated on new things. This job in particular, I mean, even if 2020 wasn't a thing, I've learned so much from, getting to know the police department, how it works, or fire department, or emergency services, or corrections. I mean, I have learned so much this year. I've been around all of those things in 29 years, but I never knew the intricacies of how they do their jobs and their business. And you've got to open yourselves up to learning, to want to learn.
I think this question is a question in reference to community policing. It says community policing is something that the Louisville West End has been needing and asking for years. How do you see this working, and what are you doing, or should be doing, could be doing to further enhance this while you are interim?
Community policing is everything. I mean, it's working with your partners in the community to create public safety, the feeling of safety. And that's the reality. We don't talk about the feeling of safety. So, a lot of times we look at stats, we look at stuff, but how an individual feels about their safety is very important. And that only comes if you take the time to have those conversations. So I talk to a lot of people, and I encourage. Right now, we're down a lot of officers, so we're running from run to run to run. But I look forward to the day where we really can take some deeper dives. They're doing some of that through Synergy. My community engagement team, we did a Build-A-Bed on the 21st at Southwick Community Center in the cold outside, and we built 40 beds or 39 beds for kids, and it was police officers and people from the community. That's the kind of stuff that, even in the midst of all of this, we still had to make time to do it. So community policing has to happen. It has to be done in concert, one with the other. So I'm just here for a short time. If I was here for the summer, we'd be doing a lot of walking patrols and telling the officers, roll your window down, and make sure you're listening and talking to people. But we are talking to people, and that is how you create a sense of shared agendas and public safety, the real feeling of safety for our citizens.
One more. What are some of the things being done to make women feel comfortable with leadership in male-dominated positions?
I could start on that, but one of the things I was thinking earlier is that how do women encourage other women, and what do we bring? I think the earlier question was, what do women bring to the table? I would agree with the earlier comments is that, I don't know that it's something that men don't bring, but it's something I'm certainly more conscious of is when I would be sitting around a table, even in an upper management position, if there were discussions going on, then very rarely would somebody ask me my opinion. So I learned early on that I had to insert myself into that conversation and be aggressive about it. And knowing that, then as I ascended into higher roles of leadership, then I would look around the room to see who wasn't speaking up. And a lot of the times those were women, and sometimes men too. But what I would do then was go out of my way consciously to call on them and say, hey, you have an opinion. What is it? Share with us what your thoughts are. And it helps to not only inform me, to give me different perspectives and to be able to help me make better decisions, but it also, I think, helped them to overcome their fears in speaking up in a very sometimes very male dominated organization.
That's a good point. Who isn't speaking up and why, and asking those opinions. Any more, Ron?
There is one. It says, I really want to know, but I don't want to derail the conversation. Chief Gentry, I'm worried about the Breonna Taylor murder. We can't seem to win. We know that you have to support your department, but the public is demanding justice. How can you balance the two?
Justice will come through truth, and you will get that from me. Justice is truth, and you will get that from me. That's no balance to me. There's only one thing.
And I'm wondering, just on the piggyback on that, Chief Gentry, you took over at such a tough time in this community. You've inherited so much, and you're in there for such a short time. Do you feel that you're going to be able to move the needle in any way? Because we talk about truth and reconciliation. Are you going to be able to do that at this important juncture in this city? Do you feel you're making any headway in that regard to bridge this gap and the hurt and everything else in our community?
I'm certainly giving it my best effort, and I will tell you this. Every day I'm working to make our agency better. Every day I'm communicating to people so that they really understand law enforcement, where people just kind of don't understand it. But I tell my officers too, I learned from a holistic doctor that, the worst thing you can do when somebody's crying is give them tissue. And so our city is crying out for help. And so I'm not here to give tissue to make people feel better. I'm here to tell truth and to make us better. And I'm very clear on that. And I will stand and tell the truth. And to me, that is justice. Everybody might not agree with where I end up, but I promise you, I will tell the truth.
We have a couple people asking, why are you in there for such a short time? You're interim. You said you will stand in the gap. You did not apply for the permanent position. Any regrets about that?
No, I mean, I'm post-cancer with my kids. I just don't know how much stress I wanted to put on myself for a long period of time. I had a great job. I was doing a lot of, and people don't realize I'm an activist too. I was out there lobbying for House Bill 327. So we got automatic expungement when things are gone. I also wrote an op-ed just recently, talking about, second chance bail for people who are incarcerated. And I believe in bail reform and all of that stuff. That's what I've been working on for 3 years. So I'm anxious to get back to my life outside of here, but I really knew that I could come in here and I could make a difference in that meantime, and then still support my city as it strives for equity and inclusion and criminal justice reform on the outside.
Chief Hess, one of the programs that we were in recently that you came in, it was policing and social justice. There had been talk that the permanent chief may be named by the end of the year. I don't know if that's still the timeline, and where are we in that search? Not to push you out at all, Chief Gentry, because I want you to stay, just so you know. But Chief Hess, where are we in that search?
So yes, we are still looking to make some type of announcement around the end of the year, beginning of the year. And so it's still the time frame. We went through a national search starting actually back in, when Chief Conrad was fired, actually. I partnered with the Police Executive Research Forum to do this national search, got a ton of community input. We had over 10,000 responses from the public to hear from people what they wanted in the next police chief. And then we did a ton of listening sessions to listen to the community. And we used that to build a position profile and put it out there for a nationwide advertisement. So we were fortunate to get some good, very good quality candidates that are ready to step in at this stage. But I do want to add that you asked Yvette if she feels that she has made an impact. And I can tell you from working with her every day and seeing what she does, she absolutely has. And what she has done will live well past her tenure here as the interim chief, because she has done things like change the way that people think about how the officers engage with the community, how the community engages with the officers. She's also put people in positions, promoted them into positions that they have her to thank for that. And these are future leaders in the organization. That's an indelible impact that'll far outlast her or her successor.
Chief Gentry, what will be the one thing, my guess is you will have many meetings with the person who is named. What would be the first thing you will say to this new chief?
I am going to buy a baton because I'm a track girl, and I'm going to put some notes inside of it. But I'm going to pass it to him or her better than the leg that I had. And that's the best effort I can give that person. And I have made a significant amount of changes, and I will be passing her a police department that is good and ready to serve this community.
I noticed you said her.
Or him.
Okay.
I'm being aspirational. I'm out of the search business. I don't have anything to do with it.
No, I was hoping you slipped up.
I'm just saying, I've been working hard. So if it's a her, let's try it. Maybe let's try her. Okay.
I know. I love that. I was hoping I got something out of you. That's what I was hoping for there. One of my final questions, I have noticed that Tom Murphy, who's in our audience, has asked a couple of questions, and he was asking about your faith, Yvette, with the job. He is apparently a seminary student, and also said he wanted to work with you to incorporate pastors and other faith leaders. So he wants to get you some information. What would you say to him about incorporating your faith in this job?
I pray a lot. And, you know, when I say there's not a lot of consensus about a lot of things, there's a whole bunch of opinions about what I should do every day. And I just tell myself, I get up, I pray, I say Psalms 91, I pray Psalms 27. I read my scripture. I get on my knees and pray humbly. And I believe that me and God are the majority in every situation, because I'm going to do it the right way. And, you know, I don't press my faith on other people, but that's what leads me and guides me. And that's how I start my day. And that's how I end my day. And so with me and God being the majority, I have the courage to do what I feel like I need to do every day.
And one other question that I'm getting on my phone that I wanted to ask you: what can the Louisville community, and specifically business community, do to support you, Chief Gentry?
I will just say, you know, I feel really supported by a lot of people, but I'm just saying, I think everybody needs to look at equity and how we got here. We did not have enough social capital in each other. And that's what played out in these streets in May, June, July, and still plays out today. It was an example of the lack of social capital we've built up in each other. So let's trust in each other and rely and invest in each other and give each other a chance.
Chief Hess, would you like to weigh in on that as well?
Yeah, I think that everything we've seen this year, hopefully has conveyed the point that it's not just one element of the community that's going to move us forward. Everybody's got to see their role and own it, and to recognize that they're part of the solution, and to not just flag problems, but to identify solutions. And so to be willing to step forward. And I think that, you know, as business leaders are in a unique position to be able to say that not only are we interested in the, you know, economics of the city and how to attract business here, but we're also interested in how to make this the best place to live for people who are already here, people who have been here, and people who need to see leadership all across the public sector, the private sector, and see us working together.
And then I'm going to ask you all one final question. I'm going to thank some of our sponsors right now, but then I want you all with the final word, each of you. So stay with me for that. Ron Jones, want to thank you for facilitating the questions. We want to thank our sponsors, and that includes where Ron works, and that's W104.7 WLOU and 1240 AM WLLV. We want to thank also Fifth Third Bank for their sponsorship and our community partner, Lean Into Louisville. We'd also like you to join us on January 26th for a special program we've lined up with the president and CEO of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Met in New York City. A group of panelists from local museums, including the Frazier, will be talking to Dan Weiss about our collective future in light of COVID and all the other struggles going on in the world. It will be from 7 to 8:30, so please register through our website, fraziermuseum.org. And if you'd like to donate to the Frazier, you can do that by heading to fraziermuseum.org/donate. We appreciate your generosity. So ladies, so much of tonight, and I thank you so for your honesty and your thought-provoking discussion, because as a female, I mean, I told Yvette when she was named interim, I said, I've got to get you and Chief Hess together, because this means a lot to me as a woman to see you all in these two top leadership positions. And I'll tell you, I was a little irked because nobody was talking about it. And I mean, these are 1 and 2 positions in our city that are held by females for the very first time. So it was a big deal to me. So thank you all for indulging me and coming on. But what you've talked about is so important. So I'm wondering if to a young woman out there, a little girl, what you would say to them about their future and where they could be and where they could see themselves. And I don't know who wants to start with that.
I'll start, and that way Yvette can back clean up here. So I would say that first off, never stop challenging yourself. Don't think that you're limited in the sense of what you can aspire to be. Look at the two of us. I mean, I don't think that probably growing up here in the Louisville area, that we or others around us probably would have envisioned that this is where we were going to end up in these positions. So be aspirational. Think about, where the sky's the limit, as far as not seeing the barriers in front of you, even if they present themselves later, to not see them up front, but to think as terms of, I'm going to conquer it. I'm going to get past it. I'm going to do everything possible. I'm going to educate myself. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to take advantage of those opportunities. I'm going to learn and I'm going to take on the challenge in order to contribute to others, in order to contribute to my community. And I hope, if nothing else, people walk away recognizing that public service is maybe not the way you're going to get rich in life, but it's the most fulfilling, I think, career that I certainly could have imagined, because you see the impact of your work. And to me, that's the whole reason I came back here and the reason I'm still doing it. And getting the opportunity to work with people like Yvette, as was mentioned, we're very different people, even though we probably grew up within 5 miles of each other if you go straight across the river. But to have the opportunity to see the world through her eyes, and then to see the impact she's making on the community, has been extremely fulfilling, and something that certainly I'm never going to forget.
I'll just say to girls, don't see the other woman as your competition. See her as your ally. And I think that's so important. And delay is not denial. People have kept saying, maybe you should have been the chief in 2012. God's time is not our timing. Maybe I wasn't ready. I believe in his timing for it, but I'm ready now because I made sure I was prepared. And so see the other woman, invest in another woman, and believe in yourself. When I say I was the 15-year-old with a smart mouth and didn't want to listen to her parents and didn't want to do all of these things. And people believed in me before I believed in myself. So look at yourself in the mirror. Don't see your flaws, see your strengths, and keep putting one foot in front of the other. And faith does help. So believe in something and make yourself on that list of things you believe in.
And one thing I always think is important to tell women, what the great thing is, there's room for all of us, right? I mean, there's room for all of us to succeed. and it doesn't have to be a competition thing. And I think the sooner we see it as that we cheer each other on and know that, you know, there's room for everybody.